Picture this: Sterling Estates, the kind of cookie-cutter suburban paradise where every lawn is mowed to military precision and every mailbox matches the approved shade of beige, or else. The HOA board treated the place like their personal kingdom, slapping fines for flags left up too long, holiday lights that dare to twinkle past January 5th, or even a car parked 2 inches over the invisible line in your own driveway. Residents whispered about the rules, but paid up because fighting the board was like arguing with a brick wall wearing pearls. And at the center of it all sat Theodore Hastings, the HOA president for 20 years, the man who turned community standards into a full-time dictatorship. Tonight was his 60th birthday bash at the Sterling Clubhouse, the swanky venue where memberships cost more than most folks' annual HOA fees, and Blake, his golden boy son and vice president, had insisted on nothing but the best. Vanessa Hastings pulled up in her sensible sedan, exactly on time, wearing that plain navy dress her family always side-eyed. Blake would call it boring. Mom would purse her lips and suggest something more festive for the neighborhood aesthetic. She'd stopped caring years ago. Nothing she did ever fit their mold. The ballroom glittered with HOA elites, board members, their spouses, and a few terrified residents who'd been invited to show loyalty. Blake held court at the bar, loud and already 3 drinks in, surrounded by his golf buddies and the enforcement committee. He spotted her immediately. Look who decided to grace us with her presence. Must have been a slow day, crunching numbers in that little consulting gig of yours. His crew chuckled like trained seals. Vanessa just smiled politely and headed for the buffet, perfecting the art of being invisible that had kept her sane through a decade of petty citations. She'd been the neighborhood's favorite target. $3,000 in fines over 7 years alone. $500 for her American flag on Memorial Day because it clashed with the Covenant pallet. Another $750 for leaving Christmas lights up an extra 48 hours. And don't get started on the time her trash bin sat at the curb 12 minutes past the approved window. Blake had personally signed every violation notice, smirking as he explained it was for the good of property values. Mom, the self-appointed compliance czar, loved to knock on doors in her pastel cardigan. We're just protecting the community, dear. You understand. Vanessa had paid every penny without a word, quietly documenting every absurd rule, every misused fee funneled into board discretionary funds that somehow covered Blake's country club tabs. Mom spotted her first, that tight-lipped smile plastered on. Oh, Vanessa, you came. We were sure you'd make time with your little spreadsheets. Her thriving business analytics firm pulled 7 figures, but why correct them? They'd never listened anyway. Where should I put this? Vanessa held up the carefully wrapped first edition business book she'd hunted for months, Grandpa Harold's favorite. Mom waved vaguely. Just toss it on the gift table with the rest. Among the golf clubs, designer watches, and premium scotch, her gift looked almost quaint. Dad would have loved it once. The man he used to be, before the HOA swallowed him whole. Blake draped an arm around her shoulders, all fake affection. You could have at least tried to look festive, Ness. This is a celebration of everything we've built here. She stepped away calmly. I'm celebrating. Quietly, he snorted. That's your problem. Everything's quiet with you. No drive, no ambition. Dad built this association from a few dirt lots, and you're happy hiding your home office while we enforce the real work. She took a bite of salmon and said nothing. Engaging drunk, Blake never ended well. He leaned in closer. At least you'll be taken care of. Family's family, right? Even if you never earned your spot on the board. She found her corner, watching the room. Theodore worked the crowd like a politician, glad-handing and reminding everyone how the strict covenants kept Sterling Estates the jewel of the suburbs. Mom floated between groups, correcting a resident's tie and whispering about aesthetic violations. Blake grew louder, boasting about the new rule he'd pushed. No political signs at all, even in windows, because division lowers resale value. Residents nodded nervously, remembering the widow 2 streets over who'd been fined $800 for a tiny Biden sign in 2020. The whole room reeked of forced smiles and fear. At 6 sharp, Theodore stood for his speech. 60 years young. Hard to believe. Feels like yesterday I was laying out the first streets with nothing but a dream and Grandpa Harold's vision. Applause rippled. I've been blessed with great friends, loyal board members, and most importantly, family. He gestured at Mom, who beamed, then at Blake, who puffed up like a peacock. My son Blake, who's been right beside me learning the covenants inside and out for 8 years. More clapping. Blake actually bowed. Theodore's eyes finally landed on Vanessa in her corner. And my daughter Vanessa, well, she's here tonight, and that means a lot. Scattered polite applause. She nodded, used to the afterthought. I'm not getting younger, he continued, voice dropping dramatically. I've been thinking about legacy. About what happens to Sterling Estates, HOA, when I'm gone. The covenants, the enforcement, the standards we've upheld. The room hushed. Everyone knew this was the real show. I haven't made final decisions yet, Theodore said, but the association is in good hands. The next generation of leadership is ready. He raised his glass. To family, to Sterling Estates, and to the future. Glasses clinked. Blake grinned like he'd already won the throne. 20 minutes later, Blake was back at the bar, drunk confidence in full bloom. Vanessa lingered near the dessert table, close enough to hear. It's happening, he slurred to his buddies. Dad's handing the presidency to me. 85% control, keeping 15 for advice, but I'll be running the show, CEO of the covenants, majority voice on every fine, every rule change. One friend asked, "What about your sister?" Blake laughed. "What about her? She walked away from all this years ago to play with spreadsheets. Dad's giving her some token payout, but the association goes to me. I've earned it, pushing those fines, keeping the riffraff in line. She doesn't deserve a vote." They toasted. Vanessa's face stayed blank, but inside she smiled. She'd been waiting 7 years for this exact moment. A small commotion stirred at the entrance. Robert Morrison, Theodore's longtime corporate attorney for the HOA, stepped in looking grim. Theodore frowned. "Robert, I wasn't expecting you tonight." Robert adjusted his tie. "Theodore, I apologize, but there's an urgent matter regarding the association's corporate structure. It can't wait." Blake swaggered over. "Anything you need to say can be said here. We're all family and loyal neighbors." Robert hesitated, then pulled a thick folder from his briefcase. "Very well. I received formal notification this afternoon from the State Corporation Commission. Theodore, you currently hold only 43% of the voting shares in Sterling Estates, HOA Incorporated." Theodore waved it off. "I know that. I sold some shares for capital years ago. I'm still majority and president." Robert's voice stayed even. "Actually, you're not. Vanessa holds 81% of the voting shares. She's held majority control for 7 years." The glass in Blake's hand slipped and shattered across the marble. Silence slammed down like a gavel. Theodore's face drained of color. "That's impossible. I never sold her anything." Robert nodded gently. "You didn't. Harold Hastings did." Blake stammered. "Grandpa's been dead for 9 years. 8 years and 7 months, Vanessa said quietly, speaking for the first time all night. All eyes swung to her. Robert continued, calm as a judge. Harold owned 51% as founder. When he passed, per his will and trust, those shares transferred to his granddaughter, Vanessa Marie Hastings. Theodore demanded, "Why wasn't I told?" Robert pulled out receipts. "I personally delivered the notification 8 years ago. You were grieving hard after your father's heart attack. You said you'd handle it later. You never did." Memory flickered across Theodore's face. Those dark months he'd barely functioned. I don't remember." Robert slid over signed documents, stock transfers, updated bylaws, and 7 years of proxy votes Vanessa had filed quietly. "Everything's properly documented. MS. Hastings has exercised her voting rights through proxy the entire time." Blake whirled on her, rage twisting his features. "You've owned the association for 7 years and said nothing? Well, I've been busting my ass enforcing rules." Vanessa met his stare calmly. "You never asked. I've been right here, watching. Realization hit him like a fine notice. Is this why Dad never made me full president? Why every big decision felt blocked? She set down her plate and walked to the center of the room, voice steady but laced with 7 years of swallowed bitterness. Because I own it, Blake. Grandpa's association. He built these streets. He left it to me. Mom's voice cut sharp. Vanessa, this is not the time or place. Vanessa turned to her. Mom, when will be the time? When Blake bankrupts the association with his discretionary spending. When estate investigators come asking about those $3.2 million in questionable expenses charged to the board account over 7 years. Theodore went gray. Blake sputtered, How do you know about those? Because I'm the majority shareholder, Vanessa replied. I have access to every ledger, every fine schedule, every decision. I control the board votes. Robert can confirm. The attorney nodded. She's approved major financials, vetoed several of your creative initiatives, and maintained oversight while staying invisible. Blake's face purpled. You've been spying. No, she corrected, irony dripping like the spilled champagne. I've been doing my fiduciary duty. There's a difference. While you've been fining retirees for aesthetic violations and using HOA funds for Vegas board retreats that somehow involved no actual meetings, I've been protecting Sterling Estates from turning into your personal playground. She pulled her own folder from her purse, the one she'd carried every day for months. And Grandpa saw it coming. He left this letter for me, written 2 weeks before he died. The room hung on every word as she read aloud. Dear Vanessa, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. I hope your father delivers this himself, but knowing Theodore, he probably couldn't. I'm leaving you controlling interest. Not because I love you more, but because I trust you more. Theodore is a good man, but weak where Blake is concerned. Blake is charming, confident, and utterly unfit to run this association. You have integrity. You make hard decisions. I know this will fracture the family, but sometimes love means protecting people from themselves. The covenants need someone who puts residents first, not their ego or their golf score. That's you. Always has been. Love always, Grandpa Harold. Silence was absolute. Blake's voice shook. 8 years of my life thinking I'd inherit this, and it was all a lie. Vanessa folded the letter. It wasn't a lie. You're good at sales and schmoozing clients, residents. But you're not president material. Grandpa knew it. I know it. Theodore finally spoke, heavy. Vanessa, why didn't you tell me? We did discuss it 8 years ago, Dad. You told me to handle it. So I handled it, protecting Grandpa's legacy while you and Blake ran it into the ground with ridiculous fines that chased good families away. Blake lunged forward. You can't just waltz in and take over. Vanessa's smile was thin. I'm not taking over. I've been majority owner for 7 years. I'm just done staying invisible while you two turn Sterling Estates into a fine factory. She slid another document across the table Robert had prepared last month. Effective immediately, new bylaws. All expenses over $10,000 require full board approval, meaning my approval. All executive compensation changes need shareholder vote. And Blake, your board discretionary credit card limit drops to $5,000 monthly. Blake's face went purple. You can't do this. I can and I am. You've burned through $180,000 this year alone on business that somehow included strip clubs and golf carts. That ends now. He spun to Theodore desperately. Dad, you're just going to let her gut the association? Theodore read the pages, hands trembling slightly. These terms are reasonable. More generous than I'd be if roles were reversed. Blake looked betrayed. Son, Theodore said quietly, she's right about the spending. I've let things slide because you're my boy and I wanted to believe the best. The room shifted. Guests who'd feared Blake's fines now stared with something like hope. Blake grabbed his jacket. I'm done. I quit the board. Run your precious covenants yourself. He stormed out, his entourage trailing like kicked puppies. The party died fast after that. Theodore called an emergency board meeting for Monday. Vanessa drove home that night, the weight of 7 silent years finally lifting. She hadn't stepped foot in the HOA office since Grandpa's funeral. Everything done remotely. Proxy votes filed from her home office while she paid fines and smiled politely at Mom's compliance visits. But now the gloves were off. Monday morning, the executive conference room felt smaller than she remembered. Theodore sat at the head, looking 10 years older. The 5 board members, old friends of Grandpa's, sat in awkward silence. "Vanessa," Theodore said, "thank you for coming." She took Grandpa's old seat. "Shall we begin?" Martin Chun, senior member, opened the floor. Theodore cleared his throat. "As you all know, information came to light this weekend about ownership. Information I should have been clearer on years ago." He looked at her. "Vanessa, would you like to address the board?" For the next hour, she laid it out. Share transfers, 7 years of proxy votes, full financial audit. She projected slides showing Blake's expense reports, board retreats that were bachelor parties, enforcement fees funneled into private accounts, absurd rules that had driven 3 families to sell at a loss last year alone. While Blake fined Mrs. Thompson $500 for a flag that was too patriotic, he charged the association for a $3,000 golf membership. Meanwhile, resident satisfaction is at an all-time low, and our legal reserve is bleeding. The board leaned in, eyes wide. Janet Wu, the treasurer, whispered, "This is thorough." I had no idea the extent. Theodore shook his head. "Not the details. I knew you voted by proxy, but never realized you were running the numbers." Vanessa met his eyes gently. "You never asked. But things have changed. Blake's spending is unsustainable. The covenants need restructuring, and I can't do it from the sidelines anymore." Martin asked, "What are you proposing?" "I take active chair of the board. Not replacing Dad as president. He's still operations lead. But weekly meetings, direct oversight on major decisions, and relaxed rules that actually serve residents instead of punishing them." Theodore nodded slowly. "You're right. I've been negligent." The vote was unanimous. Vanessa Hastings was now chair of Sterling Estates, HOA. Afterward, alone with her father, Theodore's voice cracked. "I owe you many apologies, Vanessa. I always favored Blake. Saw him as the future while dismissing you. Your grandfather saw what I wouldn't. That Blake's charm hid irresponsibility, and you had the integrity this place needed." He sat heavily. "I was too weak to admit it." She touched his shoulder. "You're not weak, Dad. You just wanted to believe the best in your son. The family's been fractured for years. We're finally being honest. That night Blake showed up at her door, drunk and furious. You destroyed everything. 8 years, my future, my relationship with Dad." She let him in because fighting drunk Blake never worked. "You think you're so much better," he slurred. "You and Grandpa decided I wasn't good enough." She sat him down. "Blake, sit. I have the records. Late arrivals, early departures, personal charges. You worked that way because that's who you were when you thought the outcome was guaranteed." The truth hung heavy. "What happens now?" he asked. "You're still vice president if you want it. Smaller portfolio, direct supervision, strict limits. Get your spending under control, show up, do the work. Or resign, and we part professionally. You're still family." He swayed to the door. "I need to think." Blake didn't get help immediately. It took another month of spiraling. More drunken rants on neighborhood Facebook groups, Mom crying on the phone, Dad avoiding eye contact, before he checked into a 30-day program. When he returned, quieter and clearer-eyed, Vanessa had already restructured his role. Smaller enforcement docket, reports to Janet, expense cap enforced. He accepted it without argument. In their first one-on-one, he admitted, "I'm not happy. But therapy's making me see how the golden child thing messed me up. How we all treated you. Like you didn't matter because you weren't the loud one pushing fines. I'm sorry for the mockery, the dismissal, for taking credit for work you did behind the scenes." It was the first real apology she'd ever heard from him. "Thank you," she said. "That means something. But it has to be real, not just for board access." He nodded. "Twice a week therapy. I'm trying." With her as active chair, Sterling Estates transformed almost overnight. She brought in neutral consultants to audit the covenants, scrapping the most ridiculous ones. No more flag fines if displayed respectfully, holiday lights allowed through February 15th, political signs permitted in windows during election season. Wasteful spending was cut. Those board retreats became actual training sessions. The management company, benefits improved, and fees were lowered for seniors. In 6 months, resident satisfaction scores jumped 30%. 3 families who'd been ready to sell stayed. Profits from fees were reinvested into actual community projects, new playground equipment instead of Blake's golf cart. Theodore handled day-to-day operations. Vanessa steered strategy. They met twice weekly, building a rhythm neither had managed in years. One afternoon, Theodore told her quietly, "Your grandfather would be proud of the association, of you, of how you handled the truth without destroying us." She smiled. "You're showing it now, Dad. That matters." Mom came around slower, still muttering about ruining Blake's life. But even she admitted over lunch, "I suppose the neighborhood does look happier without everyone terrified of the citation." "But changed everything," Vanessa replied. "Everything was already changed. We were just pretending the rules served residents instead of egos." Blake showed up for work focused, actually listening in meetings instead of dominating. He'd taken a smaller client, resident, portfolio, and stopped treating enforcement like a power trip. The neighborhood breathed easier. No more midnight knocks from Mom about covenant violations. Flags flew freely on holidays. Kids played without parents worrying about a fine for a basketball hoop left out overnight. Vanessa stood in the same conference room where Robert had dropped the bombshell a year earlier. The annual shareholder meeting was underway, and she introduced a new face. Taylor Morrison, Robert's granddaughter, fresh MBA, and full of ideas about sustainable community practices. "She's joining as advisor," Vanessa announced. Taylor reminded her of herself at that age, smart, passionate, underestimated. She'd mentored the young woman for 6 months, bringing her into the fold the way Grandpa had once believed in her. Theodore pulled her aside after. "Was that necessary? She's very young." Vanessa laughed softly. "So was I when Grandpa left me 81%. Age isn't the issue. Vision is." He nodded. "You're building your own legacy." "No," she corrected. "I'm honoring Grandpa's, the one he trusted me with." That evening she drove to the cemetery, the ritual she'd kept monthly since the birthday party. Fresh flowers on Harold's headstone. "It's been a year, Grandpa," she said, voice soft against the quiet wind. "A year since everything came out. Blake's in recovery. Dad and I actually talk strategy instead of pretending. Mom's trying. The association's thriving. Rules make sense now. Residents smile instead of hiding." She sat on the bench. "I understand why you did it. It wasn't just protecting the covenants. It was protecting me, giving me proof I mattered, that I was worthy, that your faith was real and legally binding." Tears came, gentle and healing. "You saw me when no one else did. You believed when my own parents couldn't. You gave me not just an association, but validation, purpose, the knowledge I wasn't crazy for feeling dismissed and undervalued. I was being dismissed and undervalued." She wiped her eyes and smiled. "Thank you for the association, yes. But more importantly, for seeing me. Really seeing me. And trusting me with your life's work." The wind rustled the trees like an answer. She stayed until sunset, then headed back to the office. There was work to do, always work. But now it was work she chose, work she controlled, work that proved everything she'd known she was capable of. Grandpa had given her that gift, and she would honor it every single day. Residents started noticing the difference immediately. Old Mrs. Thompson, the widow who'd once cried over that flag fine, planted a whole bed of red, white, and blue flowers and hung her flag proudly. "I haven't been cited in months," she told Vanessa at the new community picnic. Yes, they actually held picnics now instead of enforcement seminars. "Thank you, dear. You saved this place from itself." Vanessa just smiled. No need to tell her the whole story. The results spoke louder than any shareholder report. Blake kept showing up sober, handling his reduced duties without complaint. In one meeting, he even suggested loosening the mulch color restrictions. Residents should be able to express themselves a little without a $500 penalty. The board, now including Taylor, voted yes unanimously. Theodore watched his son with cautious pride, the kind that didn't blind him anymore. He's trying, he told Vanessa later. And so are we. Their twice-weekly strategy sessions turned into something almost warm, talking growth plans, resident feedback surveys, even ideas for an actual community garden instead of another rule about approved plant pallets. Mom still clutched her pearls sometimes, but the complaints slowed. One afternoon she showed up at Vanessa's door, not with a citation clipboard, but with a plate of cookies. I still don't fully understand why your grandfather did this, she admitted, cutting your father out of full control. Vanessa poured coffee. He didn't cut Dad out. Dad still runs operations, still has shares, still has respect. But Grandpa trusted me to use the power well. And I have. Mom sighed, staring into her cup. I suppose you have. The neighborhood feels lighter. Less like a prison with pretty lawns. Vanessa didn't gloat. Everything was already broken. We just stopped pretending the fines fixed it. Inside the association office, the atmosphere had flipped. Where once Blake's voice boomed with threats of citations, now open discussion filled the room. Taylor brought fresh data on how relaxed rules actually boosted property values. Families wanted to stay when they didn't feel policed. Vanessa presented quarterly reports showing fee revenue stable, legal reserves healthy, and zero new lawsuits from angry residents. This is what fiduciary duty looks like, she told the board. Protecting the community instead of punishing it. One quiet evening, Blake knocked on her office door after hours. Can we talk? Off the record. She nodded. He sat, looking more like the brother she remembered from childhood before the entitlement set in. Therapy's digging up a lot. How I treated you. The mockery, the little sister jabs, assuming you'd never fight back. I took credit for ideas you'd quietly vetoed through proxy while I played hero enforcing dumb rules. I'm sorry. Really? She let the silence sit a moment. Thank you. That means more than you know. But it has to stay real, no performative stuff for board points. He smiled faintly. I know. Twice a week, working on the golden child baggage. I like to try being actual brother and sister again, not just boss and employee. If you're willing. I'm willing, she said. But real. No shortcuts. They weren't suddenly best friends. Probably never would be. But it was a start. Coffee after meetings, actual conversations that weren't about fines. The neighborhood kept improving. New playground went in. Fees dropped for low-income owners. Even a resident advisory committee formed, so voices Blake, once silenced, now shaped policy. Property values rose. Not because of strict enforcement, but because people actually wanted to live there. A full year after the birthday bombshell, Vanessa stood once more in that conference room for the annual meeting. The board applauded when she announced another 5% fee reduction and expanded holiday decoration windows. Theodore beamed beside her. Your grandfather will be proud, he whispered. She squeezed his hand. He already was. He saw this coming. Later that evening, she returned to the cemetery, flowers fresh. The headstone gleamed under the setting sun. We did it, Grandpa, she said softly. The association is thriving. Blake's sober and contributing. Dad and I have a real partnership. Even Mom's warming up. Residents are happy instead of scared. No more midnight knocks. No more families selling because they couldn't afford the fines for living. She traced the engraving. You gave me the power not just to fix the covenants, but to prove I was never the afterthought they made me feel. You saw the quiet girl who paid every fine without complaint and knew she could lead. Thank you for the association, for the validation, for trusting me when my own family couldn't. The wind picked up again, rustling leaves like a gentle laugh. She stayed until the sky turned gold, then drove home. No, drove to the office because there was always work. But now it was hers. Controlled. Honest. Grandpa's legacy, carried forward with the integrity he'd bet everything on. And somewhere in the quiet streets of Sterling Estates, flags flew freely, lights twinkled a little longer, and neighbors smiled without fear. The Karen reign had crumbled. Justice, HOA style, tasted sweet.